So the local economy is showing some signs of resilience in the second quarter, even though South Africa is still battling load shedding, logistical holdups, and many more economic woes. Data from Stats SA shows the economy grew by 0.6% in the second quarter, up from 0.4% in the first. On an annualized basis, growth for the second quarter came in at 1.6%. Well, the sectors that contributed positively to growth included manufacturing, finance, agriculture, mining and personal services, but transport and trade contracted. Stats SA says production in agriculture increased primarily due to increased economic activity reported for field crops and horticultural products. There was increased economic activity reported for platinum group metals, gold and coal in mining, while petroleum and chemical products as well as basic iron and steel categories made some contributions to growth in the manufacturing sector. Households' final consumption expenditure, however, declined, showing the evidence of the pressures faced by consumers due to the high cost of living. All right, let's get a take now. We're joined by Siobhan Redford, economist at Rand Merchant Bank. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Redford. Is this in line with what you were expecting, hoping for?
I would say hoping, but not quite expecting. We were expecting actually a slightly negative print. So the fact that we have positive, and to be honest, what is basically double what the Bloomberg median consensus was, is actually a very positive outcome.
All right, so very good news. What is the good news? Because looking at the numbers, some of it is linked to solar panels that we're importing, so not great, but you do see some positive signs across sectors.
Yeah, I think the really big one would be your manufacturing. The fact that, it remained in positive territory and grew by 2.2% quarter on quarter. Really is showing us resilience in a sector which is not only impacted quite negatively by load shedding, but also has been affected by issues with our freight rail network and ports, through the inefficiency in the ports of either trying to get the goods out or into the country. And the fact that they have managed to do so well is quite positive. That said, it is probably worth bearing in mind load shedding wasn't as bad as we expected in the second quarter. And with very few periods of very high stages of load shedding, and that would have also helped. That said, again, I say it's very positive relative to expectations, but, sub 1% growth, actually, growth that is, very low, where we're at, is still not enough to deal really with things like high levels of unemployment, trying to deal with our fiscal issues in terms of boosting revenue growth and such like.
All right, so you've mentioned two things. It means that the high stages that we're experiencing now in terms of those rolling blackouts is going to impact quarter three. And then we need so much more to create jobs. What do you think we actually need? 3%, 6%, higher? We're nowhere near where we need to be to turn this economy around.
Absolutely. I probably would say you're looking at least 5% and above. It's difficult to tell. And it's really also not only just about the number, but also where the growth is achieved. So it's about the structure of the economy. We ideally need it to be places where you can hire people, where you can train people that doesn't need like long-term training and super specialization, but rather, more general and really relatively easy skills to pick up. But ultimately also, we need to deal with our structural constraints first and foremost. If we don't deal with that, we'll never even be able to get to like 2% or 3% growth, because as soon as we start doing too well is when you start seeing, in terms of economic activity, is when you see load shedding having to increase.
All right, so let's look at what government is saying right now and consider that we are entering an election year, but the president's saying we could see the back of load shedding by next year. So if that happens, let's hope, if it happens, how does that change things?
Well, it definitely is quite positive for our mining, manufacturing, actually the whole economy, retail, small businesses. You know, we know from the beginning of the year, agriculture was saying it's a problem because it affects irrigation. This, continuous and very high levels of load shedding. Manufacturing is very dependent upon a consistent electricity supply. Your small businesses. Aren't able to perhaps invest in alternative energy solutions, and so have to shut down or reduce production. So I think it does mean that you actually see the economy actually getting to a point where we can really see meaningful activity more sustainably. That said, I think it is really important to bear in mind as we start seeing positive, and they're small steps, but positive small steps in terms of dealing with the electricity crisis in South Africa, that the real issue now is becoming Transnet, how it is affecting mining, how it is, it affects, the transport across the country. We're having to use trucks more and more. That affects your road infrastructure, and has its own kind of problem. And if and when we trying to reverse that towards using more railway for transport, that's also going to be a bit of a concern. And then there are the ports. They're expensive, they're inefficient, and so that needs to be dealt with. That said, I do think that we are seeing some positive small steps on that side too. So so South Africa faces a number of issues. So getting just load shedding sorted out is not going to really grow us out of this problem that we have. We need to simultaneously deal with the Transnet issues. We need to deal with things like looking at water supply, because we know that's becoming an issue, looking at municipalities and the infrastructure that they oversee and maintain, and the improvement thereof and the services they provide. Red tape is a big issue. So, and I will say, we saw with the Operation Vulindlela update that, there is some progress being made, but there are still some really important areas in this economy from a structural point of view that need to be dealt with if we are to ever see those higher levels of growth.
All right, sure. So not just a mountain, but mountains are still to climb. Thank you so much for that take, Siobhan Redford, economist at Rand Merchant Bank.